Imagine the entire population of New York and London combined, just packing up their bags
Yeah.
and walking hundreds of kilometers across a completely barren landscape.
Yeah, just walking.
Right. No corporate sponsors, no government mandates, no central organizers passing out itineraries, just a massive ocean of humanity, up to 20 million people, moving as one cohesive unit.
It's honestly hard to even picture that many people in one place.
It really is. So have you ever wondered what it takes for a mere idea, maybe just an abstract concept or a few words recorded in an ancient manuscript, to physically manifest?
We are so used to thinking of history as something quietly preserved in libraries, you know?
Exactly. But what happens when history decides to get up and walk? Welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled to have you with us. Today, our mission is to explore an incredibly fascinating analytical excerpt titled Arbaeen, When the Ritual Becomes Evidence of Itself.
And the author of this text is throwing down a massive challenge to how we analyze human movements. We're looking at the Arbaeen pilgrimage, which marks the 40th day after the day of Ashura.
Which is a profoundly significant date in Islamic history.
Right, exactly. But the source material is asking you to look at this 13th-century-old religious ritual, not just as a theological practice or a date on a calendar.
No, it's framing it as a staggering human, civilizational, and sociological phenomenon.
Yes. The core premise is that some rituals become so deeply rooted and so massive in their physical scale that they stop being something you have to defend with ancient texts. The ritual itself, the physical reality of it, becomes the undeniable proof of its own power.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer scale of what this text describes requires us to look at it through the lens of human behavior, of grassroots logistics, and the physical endurance of values.
Yeah, we really have to start with the physical reality of it all.
Up to 20 million people participating from the start of the season to its end. That is literally a medium-sized country spontaneously materializing on foot.
And moving hundreds of kilometers. The text is very clear on the mechanics of this, too. It is entirely voluntary.
Right. Nobody's forcing them to be there.
Nobody. The participants are spending their own money, dedicating weeks of their own time, and expending immense physical effort. What's fascinating here is the author's observation about the utter lack of top-down infrastructure.
Yeah, that's the wild part to me.
Right. This occurs without any central authority compelling attendance. There is no economic benefit or financial reward waiting for anyone at the finish line.
Like a giant paycheck or a grant.
No, nothing like that. And most astonishingly, from a sociological perspective, there is no central global organization coordinating the logistics of feeding, sheltering, and moving 20 million human beings.
I mean, think about trying to organize a massive modern event. Like if you want to put on the Olympics, or let's say a global music festival, imagine trying to organize Fire Festival or Woodstock for 20 million people.
Oh, wow. That would be a complete nightmare.
It's a total disaster, right? You need a literal army of corporate sponsors, government agencies, crowd control experts, and supply chain managers for food, water, and sanitation.
Just to keep basic things functioning.
Exactly. It takes years of meticulous top-down planning just to keep 100,000 people from descending into chaos. What this text is describing is an event exponentially larger than any of those, happening entirely organically.
It's like a pop-up metropolis.
Yeah, pop-up metropolis. The locals along the route are just independently deciding to empty their pantries, open their homes, and set up medical tents to serve an endless river of strangers.
And, you strip away the corporate sponsors and the government logistics, and you are left with a phenomenon that is nearly unique in the history of human civilization.
Truly unique.
The author argues that at this scale, it ceases to be just a recommended action from an old religious manuscript. It transforms into a living, breathing, walking nation.
A walking nation. I love that phrasing.
And the sheer logistical impossibility of it, the fact that millions of people don't starve or dehydrate in the desert without a central supply chain, it points to a massive shift in human behavior.
Because normally, in a normal environment, a sudden influx of millions of people creates a scarcity mindset.
Exactly. People hoard. Prices skyrocket.
But during Arbaeen, the text notes an inversion of that basic economic law. The abundance comes from the radical, spontaneous generosity of individuals who view serving the pilgrims as an honor, not an economic burden.
Right. But here is the paradox.
Okay, go on.
If there is no central authority issuing orders and no paycheck waiting at the end of the road, you really have to ask what actually sustains this.
Right, you can't fuel a massive unorganized march of 20 million people on sheer adrenaline.
No, there has to be an underlying mechanism driving that radical generosity and physical endurance. So the author moves directly from the external logistics into the internal psychological mechanics of the walk.
Getting into the minds of the people.
Exactly. The text introduces the concept of the school of Arbaeen. The argument is that the true value of the pilgrimage isn't found just by counting heads or marveling at the 20 million mark.
Right.
It's found in the psychological unwinding that happens to the people participating. It fundamentally rewires the individual's operating system.
The text describes it as an environment that violently disrupts our normal, modern human tendencies. We live in a society that generally operates on a transaction basis.
Taking before giving.
Exactly, prioritizing personal comfort, avoiding pain. But according to the author, the physical reality of the walk creates a localized reality where those rules are inverted. It demands giving before taking.
It forces service before demanding.
Yeah, it cultivates humility before showing off. And it requires profound patience before rest. You have millions of people voluntarily exhausting themselves, and in that state of exhaustion, they are prioritizing the needs of the stranger walking next to them over their own aching feet.
And that physical exhaustion is the key mechanism. The ego is incredibly resilient when you are comfortable.
Oh, for sure. It's easy to be polite when you're well-rested.
Right. But when you are walking hundreds of kilometers, when you are blistered, dehydrated, and physically broken down, the artificial boundaries between me and you start to dissolve.
They just fall away.
Yeah, relying on a total stranger to hand you a cup of water or offer you a mat to sleep on strips away the arrogance we carry in our daily lives.
Wait, I have to jump in here and offer a little pushback on behalf of the listener, because we live in a world obsessed with structured self-improvement.
True.
People spend years in intense therapy. They read endless stacks of self-help books. They go to four-year universities to learn ethics and philosophy.
I see where you're going with this.
Can a few days of walking really reshape a person's character more deeply than years of traditional schooling or structured self-help? I mean, is a long walk really that transformative?
Well, the text provides a compelling explanation for why physical immersion succeeds where intellectual education often fails. The author argues that standard educational curricula fail to instill these values, even over many years of instruction, because they only engage the intellect.
Like reading a book about humility.
Exactly. Reading a book about humility or writing an essay on altruism engages your brain. You can intellectually understand the concept of sacrifice without ever actually sacrificing anything.
What, you're just sitting comfortably in a classroom.
But walking until your body screams for rest and then willingly giving your portion of food to someone else, that engages your entire being. The visceral, physical suffering is the curriculum.
Wow, the suffering is the curriculum.
Yeah, you aren't reading about a value. You are sweating it out and physically enacting it. The text claims this visceral immersion plants a value system into the very fabric of a society in a way that words on a whiteboard never could.
So it's the ultimate experiential learning. You are embodying the philosophy. And when you think about the implications of that, millions of people returning to their homes completely rewired, unified, and unafraid of hardship, it makes perfect sense that this wouldn't exist in a peaceful vacuum.
Not at all.
Anything that empowers millions of people to become completely self-reliant and cohesive is inevitably going to terrify whoever is holding the reins of power.
Right. The transition from internal transformation to historical collision is inevitable. The author points out that Arbaeen has actively shaped history because it has constantly collided with the status quo.
Collided in what way?
Well, for 13 centuries, this ritual has faced severe documented opposition. We are talking about a long history of bans, the violent pursuit of pilgrims, and systemic oppression by various authorities throughout different historical eras.
And we need to be very precise here about how the author defines the underlying motivation of this movement and why authorities feared it so much.
Yes, definitely.
The text states that this ritual is not just a quiet, passive memorial. The author defines it as a constant renewal of the project of Hussein. And the source uses some very specific politically charged descriptors for this project.
That's right.
According to the text, the goal is creating a human being who categorically rejects humiliation, who actively resists oppression, who fights the arrogant, and who exposes traitors.
And to be completely clear for you listening, we are impartially conveying the original text's viewpoint and framework here.
Right, absolutely. We aren't picking sides.
We aren't endorsing or taking a stance on these specific historical and political goals. However, understanding this framework is crucial to grasping the author's sociological point.
Because of how the authorities reacted.
Exactly. If the authorities perceive this mass mobilization not as a quiet prayer, but as the manufacturing of a populace that actively rejects oppression and humiliation, you can see why they would utilize the full force of the state to crush it.
They weren't reacting to a walk.
No, they were reacting to the threat of a fearless populace.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The author poses a brilliant rhetorical question in the text. How can authority defeat faith? It is a profound shift in perspective that exposes the limitations of state power.
It really is. Because state power, whether it's bans, violence, or imprisonment, relies entirely on external force and the creation of fear.
Like a transactional mechanism.
Right. Do what I say or I will inflict pain. But a movement like this doesn't rely on external enforcement. It relies entirely on internal belief.
Because if you have a populace that has already learned to embrace physical hardship and sacrifice through the ritual of the walk itself, the state's threat of inflicting hardship loses its leverage.
Exactly. You cannot physically legislate away a deeply rooted internal belief, especially when the believers are perfectly willing to walk hundreds of kilometers through danger to express it.
So the author is challenging us to completely upend how we validate history. The text pushes back against the traditional academic approach of sitting in university libraries, endlessly debating whether the original 13th-century-old manuscript establishing this ritual is completely authentic.
Or meticulously checking the lineage of the narrators.
Yeah. The author says the survival of the event is the proof. The fact that it survived 13 centuries of concentrated oppression, emerging from every single tribulation stronger and more widespread, validates the text. The history validates the text, not the other way around.
The survival against all odds is the empirical data. The traditional approach puts the burden of proof on the ancient manuscript.
Right.
But the author is saying the reality of 20 million people walking through a desert, defying fear and logistical impossibility year after year, reveals a depth of impact that renders arguments about textual syntax completely irrelevant.
The ritual's existence is the empirical evidence of its truth.
Exactly. And this realization leads the author to propose a completely new framework for how society should study and understand phenomena of this magnitude.
Because if you accept the premise that this is a unique sociological and historical miracle, you can't just shove it into a theology class.
Right. A theologian isn't trained to analyze the grassroots supply chain of 20 million people.
And a supply chain manager isn't equipped to understand the spiritual devotion driving the movement.
Exactly. So the author calls for the creation of an entirely new multidisciplinary field of study, referring to it as the jurisprudence of religious phenomena, or a philosophy of rituals.
Philosophy of rituals, I like that.
The argument is that looking at Arbaeen solely through the narrow lens of verifying a religious ruling completely misses the tectonic societal shifts happening on the ground.
So to break down what this new field of study actually looks like in practice, it demands throwing out the academic silos.
You really have to.
You have to study the religious texts, the Quran and Sunnah, to understand the seed of the idea. But you must seamlessly combine that theological study with hard sociology and historical analysis.
You have to look at all of it at once.
Right. The theology that sparks the belief, the sociology of the crowd dynamics and radical generosity, and the historical endurance against oppression. You cannot decouple the religion from the human behavior it produces.
And the author insists that this multidisciplinary framework shouldn't just be a niche academic pursuit discussed in elite university lounges.
Right. The text lays out a massive, ambitious vision for the future, advocating that this philosophy of rituals should be built into comprehensive educational curricula across society.
They are talking about starting this education early, bringing it into primary school so children aren't just memorizing the date of a historical event,
but actually studying the sociology of mass movement built on service, empathy, and resilience.
Exactly. And then carrying that robust curriculum all the way up through universities, integrating it into human development research centers.
And calling for it to be analyzed objectively by honest media. It is a call for a total paradigm shift in how human civilization views religious action.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author is revealing what they believe to be the deepest, most fundamental law of religious and human life.
It's a beautiful, almost haunting realization, honestly.
It really is. Major meanings, great ideals, profound philosophical values, they do not survive the grinding wheel of history merely because someone wrote them down in a book.
Because books burn, languages die out, libraries get sacked. If a value is only kept on a dusty shelf, it's incredibly fragile.
The text argues that these major meanings only survive because they transition from ink on a page into blood, sweat, and physical movement. They have to transform into human life.
They survive because generations of people literally carry them forward with their bodies.
Exactly. A concept like justice or humility remains abstract until millions of people physically enact it in the blistering heat, creating a living monument that the next generation can physically see and participate in.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? I think the core takeaway from this incredible piece of source material is that when faith turns into physical movement, when a historical memory turns into a living, breathing message, and when a symbol becomes an active project, it creates an undeniable historical force.
The meaning of an ancient text isn't proven by scholars debating its nuances in a safe room.
No, it is proven by the millions of footsteps that carry it across the desert every single year, completely independent of traditional power structures or economic incentives. The sheer staggering reality of its survival, its logistical impossibility, and its scale makes the ritual the evidence of itself.
It demands to be witnessed and studied on its own terms. It shifts the burden of proof entirely, standing as a towering testament to the capacity of human beings to organize around shared values of service and endurance when the ego is stripped away.
It leaves us with so much to process about how ideas actually survive the centuries. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We spent this time exploring the profound power of an idea leaving the page and becoming physical, sweating it out in the real world. So ask yourself this: what is a deeply held value or belief in your own life that is currently just trapped in your mind or isolated in the books you read? And what would it look like for you to turn that abstract value into a physical walking movement in your daily life? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning the world around you, and we will catch you next time.